this is a hands-on workshop, which means that we will be looking for participation from our audience. I'm Maria Gabryszewska. I teach government.
I'm Esmeralda Martinez-Maldonado. I teach chemistry here at Lone Star Online.
And our work is rooted in research that comes from Marianne Wilkemis's work on transparency. All right, so our objectives will be to define transparency, look at how we incorporate it in our classes to give you guys examples. Then we're going to ask the audience to think about and write what tenets they can incorporate of transparency to an existing assignment they use in their courses, and then have a reflection moment at the end. So I'm asking right now, if you're in the audience, think about one assignment that you have, or if you're not currently teaching, an assignment you would potentially use in one of your courses, and keep that on the back burner. So let's start with this. In the chat, if you would please write a few words, how would you define transparency? Just based on what you think transparency might mean in a teaching and learning setting. Clear, well-defined, and adhere expectations, right? The clarity, that's great. That's great. Students are made aware of learning goals ahead of time. Absolutely. Yeah, these are great tenets. Yeah, students know why, right? They know the why behind the assignments. So that's definitely the cornerstones of transparency. So how and why. And so transparent teaching and learning methods focus on that. So you need to detail what the purpose of your assignment is. You're going to talk about the skills that you're going to be practicing, knowledge that you'll be gaining, the long-term relevance to students' lives. If you showcase things, they're more likely to want to complete it, right? How will this help students understand the course content? Now, you need to outline the actual task that the student has to do. So what to do, how to do it, here are steps to do, maybe even include what steps to avoid. And the third part is criteria. You want to make it clear to your students, what are you being asked to do, right? And so how will you be evaluated? So easy ways of ensuring that you hit that mark is including checklists, rubrics, and making sure that students have it well in advance so that they can self-evaluate as they complete the work. And another element of criteria is if you actually include examples of student work plus annotations of how you graded that work. So that way students have an idea, okay, here is a student example. Here are the instructor comments and what kind of grade that student had gotten as a result.
So this framework is not just in theory. This framework actually has some research behind it and some results on how it impacted students, specifically how it impacted underserved students. So these are our first generation, our low income, underrepresented students in certain fields. The creator of this framework, Marianne Winkelmiss, her research team, researched on 1,800 students and 35 faculty. So that's a lot of students. It's a good sample size. And they basically enacted this framework in classes, and then they assessed how students rated their academic confidence and their sense of belonging, right? Which are really good. Those two things, academic confidence and sense of belonging, have been tied to success, right? If students have academic confidence and they feel a good sense of belonging in their classes, that means that they will have increased persistence, increased grades, increased passing, everything. And what they found was students actually did feel greater academic confidence and sense of belonging from those classes that had this framework enacted in. Um, and specifically in those underrepresented and first generation students. So this doesn't mean that you have to do this for every single assignment, for every single class. In the research, they found that even if this method, the transparency framework method, is used just 1 or 2 times, that you can still see those benefits. So even just one assignment in your entire semester or course, that will most likely boost these students' academic confidence and sense of belonging.
All right, so here is one of my assignments for my courses. So I teach federal government and I teach Texas government. This is just the first page. So one of the things that I want to drive home to students is literacy of media and news specifically. So in this assignment sheet, and it may be a little uh, small font if you're watching from a phone, but what I do is I, do the traditional directions. According to the transparency framework, what are we trying to look for? We're trying to look for purpose, we're trying to look for a task, and we're trying to look for criteria. So are you able to see where I mentioned the purpose? Right? If you look to this sort of second section, I literally mention the purpose of this assignment, right? So it's very explicit and clear. The task, I give a step-by-step of what the format should look like for this news brief paper. And for the criteria, I also include a rubric. So students get all this information at the very beginning of the semester so they know that they can, refer back to it and work on it step by step. And I even break it down further to make it little assignments building to this assignment. Now, part of the criteria suggestions say that if you give students a sample where they can see annotated grading, that is really helpful to them. So they can see, okay, what's good, what's bad. And that's why you don't want to give an example of a perfect paper, or if you do, you want to give more than one example whenever possible so that students can see, oh, this is an area of improvement, and I can give feedback on how to improve it.
So Maria showed some great examples of how she uses it in her government class. I teach chemistry, so it's much different. And personally, right now, this is currently, right? I always change things up, but currently, I'm using a lot of publisher material, and that happens a lot in the sciences and math, everything in STEM, um, especially for lab, right? So in that sense, it's it's more of how can I show my students what they need to do in that publisher work, right? Because they're just assignments, they access them, they have certain questions, it's homework assignments. Um, it's not necessarily uh, a created assignment, how Maria showed that I created, that it's very specific, that they have to write about a certain topic. So it's different, right? However, you can still apply this transparency idea, right? This method to how and why, even when you're working with publisher materials and the homeworks are much more straightforward. Um, so instead, what you can do is you can outline very clearly how they'll complete that work for this module for this week. And that's what I'm going to show you how I do that. So I use D2L checklists. So for Lone Star, if there's any internal people here, we use D2L, right? If there's any external people, that is simply our LMS. And our LMS has this great feature where you can create checklists and students can literally check things off. And you can link assignments within this. It's very, very, I think intuitive. Like you can link everything related to this to-do list, and it's also very satisfying, right? To be able to click everything off like, oh, I did this, oh, I did this. You can add due dates that show up in the calendar. So what I do is I actually have 3 different sections in every weekly to-do list. That's how I do it through weeks. You could also do modules. So in this entire module, you will have to do XYZ, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But for me, I do it by weeks. I find that easier. Um, and it works out because I end up focusing on like one chapter a week. So it ends up kind of being also a chapter, like split up by chapters. So I have course success, which I will show you in just a little bit, course material, and then I also give students a glimpse of what's going on next week. So this specifically is showing you the course material. So I tell them, oh, you have to study chapter 1 this week. I link the webpage for this specific chapter. They have to complete an adaptive quiz through the publisher, right? That's what I was mentioning, that I use publisher materials at this point. And they had a second quiz too this week, but they would also have a homework and then a lab. Um, and I think I show it. Yeah. So for those that teach lectures and labs, I also have a lab, right? Um Specifically for me, the publisher materials are linked through the lab course shell. So I can't link directly here, but you can outline what they need to do. So this is an example of D2L. Another thing I do on D2L, I'll show you, I have actually a link for those that don't use D2L or don't want to use the to-do list within there, but um, I also have announcements, and I think any LMS can enable you to do announcements. And this is just another version of the to-do list, right? The checklist. You can outline what they need to do every single week. You can link everything. You can have the due date. Notice that I have our due Wednesday, right? Um, so to not make it uh very difficult for upkeep, I have the assignments due the same day every semester. That way, when you make these announcements, all you have to do from semester to semester, right? Because we also have to think of the reality as instructors, right? Of enacting all of this, right? And if I added specific to do days there, due dates, that would be a lot of upkeep, like a lot of maintenance. So instead, I just have general days, and I keep those days due for quizzes, for homeworks, uh, quizzes Wednesdays, homeworks Thursdays, every semester, and that way you can keep using these things, keep using these announcements semester to semester, and it will benefit your students, and that will also benefit you. And then just another idea in case anybody is interested. I also link resources of the week every week. Um, so a studying technique, I'll link student services links, um, just in case anybody was looking for an idea of what to include in announcements to break up, just the work every time. So this is an option for those who are looking to create a to-do list that the students can like easily print out or easily have on their mobile device, right? The LMS sometimes may not be the easiest thing to and I'm about to link it in the chat right now. The LMS may not be the easiest way to have those to-do lists. So here's another option. I really like Google Docs that they actually have checklists, and it's very satisfying that when you check something off, it crosses it out. So, this is another way that you can outline what the students need to do. You can link things, you can um, include pictures, include videos, anything you want.
Yeah, the checklist provided by Tilt, which Tilt just stands for Transparency and Learning and Teaching. Um, it's pretty detailed, right? At first glance, you can be like, that's a lot of things to incorporate. But what's important to focus on is that those three sections, right? The purpose, the task, and criteria. So the QR code is there. The link will be shared for this transparent assignment checklist, but we also want to just have a very simple template, right? And you don't have to follow it to a T, but these elements are definitely helpful when included, right? So first of all, you want to include what the title of the assignment is, when it's due, right at the top, so students can just easily see that and have that there. So include the purpose of this. Talk about the skills you'll use or the knowledge that you're going to gain from this. Include those tasks that you have to complete for this assignment and how to get that good grade by mentioning what criteria you need to incorporate to succeed for this assignment. So here is where we're going to ask our wonderful participants. I hope you came up with one assignment that we can workshop together, right? I really want this to be a hands-on experience. So in a few words, and we'll be monitoring the chat here. Describe the assignment that you want to include the transparency elements to, and we'll be looking at the chat. Obviously, it's going to take a moment because people have to describe that assignment. Okay, so we've got a stats assignment. Ooh, an online text messaging simulator to add emojis to text conversation to provide clarity and reduce miscommunication. That's really cool. with with that in mind, I want everyone to take a moment or two and think about the assignment through the student lens. When we create assignments, we're basically doing it from a point of expertise. And so sometimes when we write the assignment parameters, there's a lot of assumptions we make about what understanding and that they know the tenets of what steps to take. So we're going to start with this first part. Ooh, okay. We got chemistry, Texas government. So let's start here with purpose. Okay. So with the assignment that you have in mind, write what the purpose of the assignment is. So we have the little helpful, bullet points here as you think about from the student perspective, what kind of purpose might that be for that assignment? So what should they get out of doing it? What skills might they learn from undergoing this assignment? What's the importance of it? Okay. All right. So purpose, understanding how you can use nonverbal communication, reduce conflict, improve clarity, and verbal mediated messages. That's great. So I'm trying to think of it from if a student sees that text, obviously they'll be like, that it might be a little complicated to understand how might you reduce conflict, right, from this assignment. And so that in conjunction with our next steps will sort of be beneficial in, in laying out those steps. Okay. And then purpose to engage in current affairs, right? That's so important for a government class, being able to bring in what's going on with in the real world, let's say. Skills include research, right? Okay. As you are thinking about purpose, let's think about the tasks involved, right? when you write the assignment parameters, what kind of things are the students going to be expected to use or do? Now, if it's a pretty detailed assignment, I'm not going to ask you to write a whole, huge paragraph for the purpose of this presentation, but I do want you to write down at least one task that students will need to do your assignment. So safety, right? If the purpose of um, your assignment is to understand how safety is important and be familiar with the tools of the trade, right? What task would a student need to do to familiarize themselves? Okay, Al writes, determine if sample proportion is significantly different than a claim about population portion. Understand how to collect, organize, analyze. Okay, so the task to fulfill that purpose would be collecting data using Google Forms for a categorical variable and determining sample proportion. Okay, yeah, right. The task, right, is pretty explicit, right? Collecting that data using a specific software. Um, Good. Right. Task one. Think about their life and time that they got in trouble or a time in which they think government did not fulfill its role in making a person secure. Once they think about this, look at the law on the issue in Texas. Do research, look up legislation on a particular issue. I think that that's wonderful, right? You make it personal to the student, their experience. As the more you can do that, the more engaged the student will be when they're doing their assignment for your class. All right. For Jillian, completing soft chalk, lesson on verbal and nonverbal communication, right? So that they have the context of what that is. Good. Reading the previously created text conversation without the emojis, then decoding the messages from Jack, adding emojis to help Jill understand the exact reason for Jack's delay in responding. Yeah. So these concrete, specific steps, once they're outlined for students, they're a lot more, they can visualize how they're supposed to complete their assignments. Awesome. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah. So, again, putting yourself in the student's shoes and thinking about after or when they're completing the assignment, what they have included, right? To be able to be successful on the assignment. So think of, do I have a rubric? Should I create a rubric to clearly outline those criteria? Um, can I just list out the criteria and the points associated? So, you can do it in whichever way you need. Um, but having those clearly written out, and usually rubrics work best. That's why they exist. And then additionally, do you have an annotated graded example to actually show how you break down every section that they're including and how you assess that? And of course, it has to line up with the rubric, right? You can't just be left field, um, giving 5 points here, but they completed everything listed in the rubric, right? So again, it's streamlined, right? You have a rubric or you have a very specific guidelines on completing the assignment and the points associated with that, and then how you actually grade it. And I think, was it Jillian, right? She said, I give an example too. This is great. Students love and need examples. And just a personal anecdote, um, I am taking PhD classes, right? And I'm taking an instructional design class right now. It's fully online, asynchronous, and the instructor always includes examples of previous students' work. And when I say this has been my saving grace completely. So from a student's perspective, I really think the examples and the annotated graded examples are really helpful because then they know, oh, I can do this, right? An assignment can feel so overwhelming, so intimidating if, especially if this is like their first class they're taking in college. Imagine how they feel. Very intimidated. If they're first gen, they probably don't have somebody. If they're lucky, they have a sibling they can, ask like, hey, you know, can you help me break this down? But if they don't, like, it's going to be very intimidating. So having those examples can lessen that emotional, aspect of it and can break it down like, oh, okay, let me look at how they did it. I'm gonna do it how uh like my version of it.
All right. So now that we sort of detailed how we can look at purpose and task and criteria and how we can include it in our own assignments for courses, I just want everyone to take a moment and let us know what is one way that you can incorporate what you've learned today to any one of your courses. One of the great things about this framework is that, as Esmeralda mentioned, that you don't need to completely rewrite the whole of all of your classes for this to be effective. One small little change can make a huge difference, right? Clarification. Um, let's see what's coming in. All right, task checklist for assignments and weekly checklist in LMS. Yeah, that's great. Jillian, love the emoji assignment. Yeah, one of the reasons that we wanted to present was so that there's a tangible takeaway that you can take after, listening to our presentation. And I think transparency is important, not only just I mean, if you're thinking about the modalities, if you're thinking about face to face or hybrid or online, but I think it's even more so important in an online environment because students aren't there to give that immediate feedback that you would in an in-person class. Like, what does this mean? I'm not sure how this could be done. Um, and so making assignments as transparent as possible, that really can make a huge difference for students. Right. Shenyang, showing previous students' work with feedback is a great idea. Absolutely. Yeah, students have actually emailed me and said, like, thank you so much for sharing this. I have an idea of how to do it. Because I mean, if you look at the text of it, right, my assignment was a news brief, right? They might say then be like, what am I making news? Like what is that? So clarity, examples absolutely helps. Right. So Jillian says she'll give an example of a good uh, criteria, right? Right. So that is our part of the presentation. Here are sources, and we've been sharing these sources throughout our presentation. And we do want to open it up. If you have any questions for us, we're here to answer. And if you want to workshop some ideas, maybe you're not sure what this would be helpful for, let's help. Let's talk about it. And I also wanted to say thank you so much for participating.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, my worst nightmare would be just no one saying anything in the chat. So I'm so glad everyone was participating. Thank you. There aren't any questions in the Q&A, right?
No.
No, okay.
Right, yeah, there's not any in there, just, yeah, but if
Okay.
anyone has a question, they can type it in there. I see we have 13 minutes left, so if there is a question that anyone has, you can type it into the QA box and we'll chat about it.
Yeah.
If anybody needs any like resources we shared, like the announcements I put on D2L, I'm happy to like copy and paste that over through email. So, just feel free to email us.
Yeah. And thanks for moderating, Joey.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. I'm part of the tech trek all day yesterday and today.
Awesome. Well, if there's no questions, we'll be here, but thank you so much for showing up, participating. Thank you.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and, oh, something just popped up in the question box. Let's see.
Oh, okay.
I'm
From
actually
Jillian.
working on checklists in D2L, and I haven't figured out how to combine them for when I
Mm.
teach different length sections. Do you know if you can?
So this is an issue that I've been dealing with. And I think the best answer to this is once you build it one time for a certain length, you can copy that over. But I don't know if there's an easy workaround because I haven't been able to copy. What I do right now is I make a checklist for, week week 2, right? Because week 1 is very different. But week 2 starts getting into that routine of quizzes on Wednesdays, homeworks on Thursdays. I just copy that over. But in terms of different length sections, like an 8-week to a 16-week, that's where I've been um, facing issues. And not issues like technical or anything, just it's gonna require some work on the front end. But once you built that, I feel like you can use them forever if you have similar assignments every semester. Um, but I mean, another good thing about building those on the front end is we have that year-long schedule, right, that we're submitting, that we're choosing. So I chose the same terms every semester, 8-week terms, knowing in mind that I'm going to be reusing those same checklists. So I know that's not really an answer, but that's what I'm doing. And I'm like, if you ever want to chat about it and share, like what we're doing, Jillian, I'm open to that. Yeah, Mark, that's a great point. You can have sandboxes and just work on that slowly. You can have that ready for any 8-week term you teach. And then, yeah, I know. I wish everything was more evergreen friendly. Um, if you do it in modules, if you do it in modules, that way you can just have that checklist for that module. You don't really include the due dates on there. Just say reference the course calendar, reference the course calendar. That way, no due dates will be really related to it, but they'll still have the things they have to do in that module. I think that's a good workaround. Yeah. Yeah, definitely reach out and we can talk. Because honestly, it might be something I'll do too, because that way I won't have to worry about moving things over, just editing things. Great questions.
Unless anyone has a last minute question, you have 8 minutes to say it. Otherwise, I guess we can start wrapping up here.
Mm-hmm. Enjoy your coffee, Jillian.
Thank you, Jillian, for all the interaction.
Mhm.